Mated to the Lycan King. Chapter 10. Raven stood in the quiet corridor just outside the makeshift interrogation room, her heart still pounding from the confrontation that had ended the previous night. She pressed one hand gently to the swell of her stomach, reminding herself that she needed to stay calm for the sake of the twin lives she carried. Lucian was only a few steps away, pacing back and forth like a caged wolf. His anxiety was obvious. Every time his golden eyes flicked to Raven, there was both relief at her presence and fear that the shadowy threat they had just unearthed might take everything from them. She watched him in silence for a moment, then placed her other hand lightly on his arm to still him. He stopped pacing, exhaling slowly as though trying to banish the tension from his lungs. The door to the interrogation chamber creaked open, and Thalos emerged with a grave expression. He nodded to Raven, then turned to Lucian, his voice low. He said that Darius was still inside, pressing the prisoner for more details. A few hours earlier, that cloaked stranger had spewed cryptic warnings about an imminent danger, something tied to Lucian's past and potentially harnessing Raven's elemental power against her will. Thalos offered only a small shake of his head when asked if they had any concrete facts yet. The information gleaned so far was murky, but they had confirmed that the threat had deeper roots than a lone conspirator. Lucian cursed under his breath, still wound tight with restless energy. Raven took a breath and reminded Thalos that he should watch for any sign that the prisoner was on the verge of collapse. An interrogation was useless if the captive slipped into unconsciousness or worse. She wanted details, not a tragedy. Thalos agreed, disappearing back into the room with quiet resolve. Lucian raked a hand through his hair, turned to Raven, and tried to form words, but she sensed his fear before he spoke it. He told her that he felt he was failing to protect her, failing to protect the unborn children he already loved with every fiber of his being. Raven responded by stepping closer, carefully taking his face between her hands. She spoke softly, reminding him of their shared victories, from the earliest battles against Gregor's forces to the more recent triumphs in stabilizing the kingdom. Each challenge had tested them, but together they had endured, forging an unbreakable bond. He let out a breath that sounded half like a growl of frustration, half like a sigh of acceptance. She stroked his cheek, telling him that no matter what threat lurked in the shadows, he was not alone. She was strong in her own right, and had come too far to be bowed by terror now. He drew her carefully into his arms, mindful of her pregnancy, and she felt the tension in his muscles as he held her. She told him gently that she believed in him completely. He closed his eyes, leaning into her reassurance. It was a quiet moment of solidarity, the two of them standing in the corridor, while the distant torchlight flickered across stone walls. She felt her twins shift inside her, as though echoing her resolve. Darius emerged eventually, wiping sweat from his brow. A heavy scowl cast over his usually composed features. He beckoned them into a smaller chamber adjacent to the interrogation room, a place where they could speak without the prisoner overhearing. He explained that the cloaked figure claimed to know secrets about Lucian's youth, matters perhaps linked to obscure alliances or rivalries that had never come to light. It sounded personal, tinged with bitterness. Lucian stiffened, old memories churning behind his eyes. Raven curled her fingers around his, wordlessly telling him that whatever ghosts came calling, she would stand by him. They conferred in low voices, Thalos joining them soon after, describing the prisoner's hints of a rogue faction that saw Raven's elemental powers and her pregnancy, with twin heirs as a potential key to reshaping the political landscape. Something about the mention of Lucian's undisclosed past roused a deeper layer of tension. Raven touched the faint mark on her neck, a reminder of the mate bond that had once terrified her, then become the source of her greatest strength. She said quietly that they needed more clarity, but Darius admitted that the prisoner was stonewalling unless threatened further. Yet brute force could lead to half-truths or even a broken mind. They would have to proceed carefully. Lucian's jaw tightened as he demanded a private moment with the prisoner. Darius hesitated, but ultimately nodded. If this was about Lucian's past, perhaps Lucian could force a breakthrough. Raven studied his face and told him to be cautious. She trusted his instincts but feared what might happen if this stranger deliberately twisted old wounds to provoke him. He kissed her temple, then followed Thalos back into the interrogation room, leaving her behind with Darius. She stood silently, breathing in the torch's smoke and exhaling until her heart settled into a calmer rhythm. Darius sensed her turmoil and asked quietly if she was all right. She confessed a growing dread for her children's future. This captured conspirator had hinted at someone more dangerous lurking, a force that desired to harness or destroy her power. Darius placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, speaking with uncharacteristic softness. He told her that the pack was united behind her and Lucian, that no foe would break them as long as they stood together. She offered him a grateful smile. She had come to value Darius's reassuring presence, a rock of silent loyalty who yearned, she suspected, for something beyond endless vigilance. She prayed the future would give him the peace he deserved. A moment later, Lucian returned, brow furrowed, eyes gleaming with restrained anger. The prisoner had dropped the name of a figure Lucian once believed dead, a rogue with ties to his earliest training days. Someone named Cedric, who'd vanished under mysterious circumstances a decade ago. Lucian told Raven that Cedric had been a friend at first, then a rival. They fell out over differing views on how to unite the packs, and Cedric disappeared after a vicious argument. Lucian had assumed him lost or dead, but it seemed Cedric had been biding his time, gathering like-minded rogues who hated the monarchy's hold on the territory. Raven listened carefully, pressing Lucian for details. He admitted that he felt guilt, that perhaps he had not tried hard enough to reconcile with Cedric back then. She took his hands in hers, telling him that no matter what regrets he carried, the blame for this new threat belonged to those who sought chaos, not to him. He exhaled shakily, nodding. The prisoner had said little else, but the tension thrumming through Lucian's posture signaled that the revelation had cut deep. When they finally stepped away from the interrogation wings, Raven suggested he rest or at least step outside for fresh air, but he shook his head, insisting he would not leave her side. She insisted she was fine, just weary from the emotional weight. They retreated to their personal chambers, where a servant had lit the fireplace. The warm glow illuminated Raven's reflection in the polished wood of a small table. She turned to Lucian, voice trembling slightly as she asked if he felt she was strong enough for what lay ahead. He answered without hesitation that she was stronger than he had ever been, reminding her of how she had emerged from a rogue's life to become a queen, beloved by her people. He said she had a spirit that refused to yield, and that was why he believed they would endure. Amid the tension, Lucian arranged a private meal that evening on a small balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens. Raven was surprised to find a table set with modestly prepared dishes, soft bread, warm stew, and fresh fruit. Flickering lanterns cast dancing shadows, and the night air, though cool, felt alive with possibilities. He pulled out her chair, brushing a tender kiss across her temple before sitting opposite her. She noted the lines of worry around his eyes, but beneath them, a flicker of determined love shone. Over the meal, they talked in hushed tones. Lucian admitted he feared failing as a father, that the idea of bringing children into a world so fraught with danger sometimes paralyzed him with fear. Raven leaned forward, resting her hands on his. She reminded him of how his leadership had rebuilt the kingdom from strife, how he had guided her when she floundered in self-doubt. She confided that she, too, felt overwhelmed at times, unsure if she could protect their daughters from every shadow. Yet she believed wholeheartedly in the bond they shared, in the pack's loyalty, in their ability to stand against looming threats no matter how grave. He closed his eyes at her words, gratitude and devotion clear in his face. They moved their chairs closer, letting the chill of the night fade beneath the warmth of their closeness. Raven shivered slightly when a breeze passed, and Lucian stood, draping a soft cloak around her shoulders. She caught his hand as he did so, pressing her lips to his wrist. then slid her hand along his arm until he eased back into the seat next to her. In the quiet hush that followed, they shared gentle caresses, interspersed with murmured vows about what they wanted for their children. Lucian leaned in, capturing her mouth in a kiss that was both tender and laced with an undercurrent of desperation, as though he feared time might steal these moments away. She answered with equal passion, letting the world's worries melt into the darkness beyond the balcony rail. They ended the evening holding each other close, a silent promise hanging between them that whatever new conflict approached, it would not shatter their unity. Lucian eventually coaxed Raven back inside, helping her settle into bed, and for a few short hours they drifted into a restless sleep. At dawn, a messenger arrived in a hurry, explaining that Kieran and Ella had been seen at the gates accompanied by a small entourage. Word must have reached them about Raven's distress. Raven and Lucian hurried to greet them in the courtyard, heartened by the sight of Kieran dismounting with an air of determination. Ella, looking poised and confident in her Luna attire, followed him with quick strides. Kieran's eyes locked with Raven's, and she sensed the familiar tug of their twin bond. Relief and urgency mingled in their shared glance. Their reunion was warm but laced with tension. Raven embraced Kieran, feeling the swirl of concern in him. Ella came forward, taking Raven's hands gently and searching her face for signs of stress. Raven offered a small smile, saying she was all right and that the babies were safe. Kieran glanced at Lucian, then demanded a full explanation of the threat. Lucian obliged, detailing the imprisoned stranger's cryptic statements, Cedric's possible involvement, and the implication that certain rogue factions saw Raven's unborn twins as a key to seizing power. At the mention of unborn twins, Ella's eyes flicked to Raven's belly. Her expression shifted from worry to a steely resolve, and she squeezed Raven's hands, telling her softly that no force would ever be allowed to endanger those children. In that moment, Raven recalled how Ella had once fought fiercely to deny her own mate bond, how she had doubted her place in any pack. Yet here she stood, brimming with the quiet authority of a Luna who would defend her loved ones at all costs. Raven's heart swelled with gratitude. They moved inside for a more private discussion. Kieran explained that the Southern Territory remained mostly secure, though he had faced pockets of resistance from those still loyal to former alphas. He confessed that a few had threatened sabotage if he continued aligning with Lucian and Raven, but none had posed a direct threat yet. The reason Kieran rushed here was a dreamlike message he believed came through the twin bond, a sense of Raven's distress that he could not ignore. Raven nodded, sharing her side of that metaphysical nudge, how she had felt Kieran's presence when her anxiety rose. Ella chimed in, adding that she fully supported Kieran's decision to return north, that the southern packs would maintain order in their short absence. She also admitted wanting to stand by Raven's side in a crisis. Kieran reached for Ella's hand and she slid her fingers through his, an action that spoke volumes about their united front. Raven glimpsed a shared intensity in their eyes, remembering how her brother once doubted his worthiness to lead, and Ella once feared any close bond. How far they had come indeed. Later that day, Kieran and Raven decided to train briefly, hoping to sharpen the elemental magic they wielded. They chose a secluded courtyard behind the castle, ringed by tall walls for privacy. Lucian watched from a safe distance, flanked by Ella, Darius, and Thalos. Raven felt the familiar charge of energy rise in her veins as she called on her fire-based power. Opposite her, Kieran closed his eyes, summoning the currents of wind that danced around him. They began a synchronized exercise, a form they had once used to practice channeling their abilities without harming each other or innocent bystanders. Fire leapt in ribbons from Raven's palms, twisting like serpents through the air. Kieran summoned gusts that spiraled around the flames, controlling them before they scorched the ancient stone. Gradually, they pushed each other's boundaries, Raven intensifying the heat, Kieran countering with a swirling wind that contained the blaze. At one moment, she felt a surge of newfound energy, as if her pregnancy had shifted her center of magic. Kieran's eyes flashed in response, and she realized he sensed it too. Together, they carefully tested the extent of this added power, forming a spinning vortex of flame and wind that flickered brilliantly before dispersing harmlessly skyward. Ella and Lucian clapped softly from the sidelines, awed by the display. Thalos's normally impassive face held a hint of wonder, while Darius watched with an almost paternal pride in his stance. When Raven and Kieran finally ended the session, both breathing heavily, they met each other's gaze with a mixture of satisfaction and trepidation. They had grown stronger, but so had the stakes. They embraced, speaking in quiet voices about the next challenges. Raven sensed her twin's determination to protect her at all costs, and she placed a hand on his arm, telling him he did not have to bear the burden alone. Meanwhile, Thalos moved off to a corner of the courtyard, eyeing the few onlookers with a contemplative gaze. Raven noticed it, and, once she had composed herself, walked over to him, asking if he was all right. He hesitated, then admitted that the recent turmoil had made him question how much of his life he had spent shut off from deeper connections. He confessed, in as few words as possible, that seeing Kieran and Ella's closeness, Raven and Lucian's devotion, even glimpses of affection in everyday pack life, had stirred a sense of longing he had never let himself feel. Raven placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, telling him that it was never too late to open his heart, that he deserved the same joy he helped others defend. He offered a faint but genuine smile, quietly appreciative of her words. At that moment, Darius approached, responding with a half grin that was rare on his usually stoic face. He said the training looked promising, but they needed more than raw magic to thwart a cunning enemy. Lucian joined them then, reminding everyone that the pack itself would be crucial: strategy, unity, and vigilance. Raven, still catching her breath, nodded, telling Darius that she trusted him to help fortify the castle's defenses. Darius hinted at a new plan he had been formulating, something about doubling the outer patrols and possibly erecting additional wards against intruders, though he admitted they would need specialized knowledge for that. She noticed how the conversation drifted from merely talk of swords to the hidden depths of each man's aspirations. She wondered if Darius, like Thalos, yearned for a life that transcended battle after all they had faced. As dusk settled, Raven, Lucian, Kieran, and Ella gathered in the main hall. The sense of urgency in the air was palpable, as pack members bustled about relaying messages, organizing supplies, and forging new weapons. They paused from the chaos for a small meeting in a quiet alcove, hoping for a moment of clarity. Kieran detailed how the southern packs had begun to unify under his leadership, with Ella's guidance smoothing tensions. He admitted that a few dangerous holdouts lurked, but they lacked the strength to take on a united pack. Here, however, in the north, the threat was more insidious, tied to hidden plots and the possibility of an imminent strike targeting Raven. Ella offered to stay by Raven's side, voicing her willingness to face any threat. Raven thanked her, but insisted that she also needed Kieran and Ella's vigilance in the south if trouble arose there. They debated the logistics. If they split up, they risked weakening both territories. Kieran countered that if the real threat was here, he would rather fight for Raven's safety directly. Lucian rubbed the bridge of his nose, torn by the same dilemma. Eventually, they agreed that a balance might be struck. Kieran and Ella would remain here long enough to bolster the defenses and glean more intel on the threat. Then Ella would decide whether to return south if any crisis demanded it. They concluded the meeting with a solemn vow to stand together. Raven looked around at the three of them, her mate, her brother, her friend, and felt a pang of gratitude that these strong, loyal wolves stood with her. In a show of unity, she clasped Lucian's hand, Kieran's eyes met hers, and Ella nodded with fierce devotion. Later that evening, when the corridors quieted except for the distant murmur of guards, Lucian coaxed Raven to the nursery once more, hoping to share a moment of calm amid the storm. The nursery lamps cast a soft glow over the twin cribs, and Raven found herself stroking the carved edges, imagining the day she and Lucian would stand here, rocking two newborns to sleep. He joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. She leaned her head against his shoulder, exhaling as she sank into the comfort of his presence. He asked if she had decided on any names yet. She teased him lightly that perhaps they should each choose one name, and let the twins argue about which belonged to whom when they were older. He chuckled, but his laughter carried an undercurrent of anxiety. She turned to face him, lifting a hand to his cheek. She asked him to share his mind. He hesitated before whispering that every time he let himself imagine the future, holding his daughters, teaching them to shift, celebrating pack festivals, he was struck by a whispering voice that warned him it could all be snatched away. She felt tears prick her eyes as she whispered back that she understood the fear, but fear would not stop them from living. They embraced, a gentle hush enveloping them. The world outside might be rife with secrets and conspiracies, but here in the nursery, they nurtured hope. She felt his lips brush her forehead, then graze downward in a slow, comforting gesture that made her heart race. Their kiss deepened, spurred by an urgency to savor every moment. Warmth flooded her, and she slid her arms around his neck, drawing him close. They stood among the soft glow of lamplight, cherishing the calm, reaffirming their bond with shared breath and whispered love. For a fleeting time, the tension eased, replaced by the tenderness that had blossomed between them, ever since that first day he staked his claim on her heart. They lingered there until the flicker of flames died low, then retreated to rest, hoping the morning would bring some reprieve. The next day dawned with an ominous stillness. Raven and Lucian summoned the pack's inner circle, including Kieran, Ella, Darius, and Thalos, to a more formal war room. Guards patrolled double outside the doors, ensuring privacy. Raven explained that the captive intruder had revealed, in frantic whispers, the outline of a coming attack. The words were sparse, but enough to suggest that Cedric and his rogues intended to strike soon, perhaps from multiple fronts. Lucian, jaw clenched, relayed his personal history with Cedric to the group, detailing how their falling out had twisted into something more dangerous than a mere grudge. The discussion turned to strategic defense. Darius proposed intensifying the perimeter patrols further, possibly setting hidden sentinels along forest paths. Thalos volunteered to lead scouting missions deeper into uncharted regions, searching for signs of rogue activity. Kieran insisted on offering his warriors assistance, suggesting that a few of his most trusted fighters from the south could stand guard within the castle. Ella chimed in that infiltration was their biggest fear. If an attack came from within, it could catch them off balance. Throughout the meeting, Raven observed how each of them responded in distinct ways. Darius's voice remained measured, but a spark in his eyes hinted at underlying emotion. Thalos's face held that quiet intensity, yet occasionally a flicker of something akin to yearning crossed his gaze, as if he hoped for more than endless battle. Kieran was earnest, desperate to protect Raven from a threat he felt vicariously through their twin bond. Ella contribuyó consejo racional, mezclando sus nuevas experiencias como una luna con sus instintos protectores feroz. And at the center of it all, Lucian stood resolute, though at times his expression betrayed the fear that none of their measures would be enough. As they neared the end of the discussion, an agitated guard appeared with an urgent message. The prisoner had lashed out during the night, faking illness to draw in a caretaker, then nearly overpowering them in a moment of desperation. The caretaker's shout had brought reinforcements and the prisoner was subdued. But in that chaos, the intruder had spat out new details of an attack planned for the next full moon, only days away. A hush fell over the group, dread knotting in the pit of Raven's stomach. Lucian's hand found hers beneath the table, squeezing once for reassurance. Before the guard left, they also explained that the intruder seemed to believe Cedric's true aim was not simply dethroning Lucian or dismantling the monarchy, but capturing Raven specifically, exploiting the birth of the twins to enact some dark plan. The guard's voice quivered at the mention of forcibly harnessing Raven's elemental magic. Raven gritted her teeth, eyes blazing at the thought that anyone would dare attempt to use her children, unborn and vulnerable, for such a vile purpose. The guard bowed and departed swiftly, leaving a tension-laden silence behind. Lucian breathed out slowly, stood and announced that preparations must escalate. No more second-guessing. Darius and Thalos affirmed that the pack would be ready to fight if needed. Kieran thumped a fist to his chest in solidarity. Ella added that she and Kieran would remain until the danger lessened, or until Raven felt safe. Raven felt her heart swell, grateful for such loyal allies. Then Lucian asked them all to take their assigned tasks, with immediate urgency. With resolute nods, they dispersed. In the corridor, Raven lingered with Lucian. She asked him if he truly believed a direct battle was imminent. He nodded grimly, explaining that Cedric had always been cunning. If he had mustered a following large enough to attempt an infiltration, the threat was grave. She told him that no matter what, she would not cower in some hidden room, waiting helplessly. He studied her eyes and admitted he had no desire to stifle her fierce spirit, only to keep her from harm. They stood in silence until he guided her gently back toward their chambers, reminding her that stress could harm their unborn daughters. She agreed to rest, but only after they had set in motion every defensive measure possible. As daylight waned, Raven found Lucian standing on the castle ramparts, gazing at the crimson hue of sunset. She slipped beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. He lifted an arm to circle her waist, quiet gratitude on his face. Neither spoke at first, letting the hush of early evening cradle them. Far below, they spotted Thalos rallying scouts for a nighttime patrol. Darius stood near the gates, issuing final instructions to a group of warriors. In another courtyard, Kieran and Ella conversed with local leaders, the resolute set of their posture telling Raven that they were determined to unify the pack under a single purpose. She turned her face up to Lucian, finding him already watching her. She murmured that despite everything, she had never felt as certain of her place in the world as she did now, with him, carrying their twin daughters, standing among friends who had become a family. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, replying that she was the reason the kingdom had hope at all. They exchanged a lingering kiss, and in that tender press of lips, Raven sensed their combined strength and unspoken vow that they would endure any storm. A soft knock broke their reverie. Ella appeared at the top of the ramparts, looking mildly apologetic for interrupting. She informed them that the intruder, in a bout of frustration, had made further cryptic remarks about the attack's date and the plan to overrun the castle from multiple sides. There was a sense of finality in her voice as she suggested that they must be fully ready before the next few days passed. Lucian thanked her, and Raven asked if Kieran was all right. Ella nodded, though her face showed the weight of worry. She said they would stand guard together tonight, letting Raven and Lucian get what little rest they could. Raven hesitated, then stepped forward to hug Ella, bridging the silence with a heartfelt gesture of gratitude. Ella se relajó en el abrazo, susurrando que protegerían a los mellizos sin importar el costo. Raven whispered back that she knew, and that it meant more than words could express. After Ella left, Raven leaned against Lucian, feeling the night air grow chilly. He walked her down from the ramparts, tucking her arm through his as they made their way back inside. Torches lit the corridors and shadows loomed where the light did not reach, a silent reminder of the threat that had yet to reveal its full shape. They ended the evening in a quiet chamber where a fire crackled softly, sending flickers of orange across ancient tapestries. Together, they readied themselves for sleep. Raven slipped into a light robe, resting on the couch before the hearth while Lucian removed his armor piece by piece, eyes distant with thought. She sensed he was replaying old memories of Cedric, perhaps recalling the intensity of their bond before it soured. After a while, he sat beside her, jaw taut, gaze flicking to her belly, which rose and fell with each of her steady breaths. He told her in a near whisper that he had never imagined fatherhood would come with such a burden of fear, that he felt as if every choice he made could either keep them safe or invite disaster. She lifted his hand, pressing it against her stomach, telling him that she understood, Her wolf instincts screamed at her to guard these children with tooth and claw. Yet she believed wholeheartedly that love and unity would prevail against the bitterness of an old rivalry. He let out a breath and kissed her hairline, lingering there. In the quiet that followed, they sank into each other's arms, allowing the fire's warmth to lull them. The hush of the chamber served as a momentary sanctuary against the swirling storm of tension. They fell asleep eventually, Raven's head nestled under Lucian's chin, his arms wrapped securely around her as though he feared she might vanish in the night. Dreams came fitfully to her, flickers of twisted corridors, half-familiar faces leering from the darkness, and somewhere distant, the echo of a child's cry. She woke at dawn with a start, Lucian already stirring at her side. She pressed a hand over her racing heart, praying that when the real conflict arrived, they would be ready. The day proved relentless. Scouts returned with scattered rumors of strange movements near the borders. Darius led a squad to survey suspicious tracks in the western woodlands, while Thalos departed for the eastern hills. Kieran and Ella offered to reinforce the front gates, splitting their time between coordinating supplies and quietly interviewing travelers to see if the name Cedric or any suspicious activity had been heard. Raven spent hours conferring with council members, ensuring that panic would not spread among the people. The castle thrummed with a sense of anticipation, both exhilarating and terrifying. In a rare lull, Raven found Kieran alone in a corridor, leaning against a windowsill and staring out at the training grounds. She joined him, placing a hand on his arm. He told her he felt uneasy, as though his wind magic itched under his skin, warning him of an approaching storm. She admitted that her fire magic felt similarly restless, as though awaiting a spark to ignite. They reflected quietly on how far they had come since the days they barely understood their abilities, marooned between fear and hope. Now they stood as pillars of the kingdom, about to face a new menace. He gently touched his forehead to hers, letting the twin bond flow between them, exchanging resolve without the need for words. The final blow came late that afternoon. A flustered guard explained that, in one last fit of defiance, the imprisoned intruder had spat out that Cedric's loyalists were gathering en masse. The intruder sneered that the monarchy would fall under combined attacks from within and without. Raven, listening as Lucian received this news, felt a chill wash over her. She asked the guard if more details were offered, timing, positions. The guard shook his head, only that the intruder believed the pack's downfall was imminent. Without hesitation, Lucian summoned everyone to the war room. The group converged in short order: Raven, Kieran, Ella, Darius, and Thalos, along with a few trusted council members. The captured intruder's final statement forced a sense of urgency. They pored over maps, discussing every potential vulnerability. The plan took shape. Watchers at all perimeter gates, small squads patrolling the outlying villages, scouts posted in rotating shifts so no infiltration could occur unnoticed. Kieran and Ella pledged to remain as long as necessary, offering the southern warriors for additional backup if calls for help arrived. As the meeting wound down, Raven placed her hands on the table, gazing at the others. She told them with unwavering conviction that this kingdom was her home, these people, her family, and her children's future at stake. She would fight with every ounce of her will to defend it. Lucian stood behind her, resting a hand between her shoulder blades, adding that anyone who dared threaten Raven or their unborn daughters would face the full might of the pack united. Darius and Thalos echoed that sentiment, voices tinged with steel. Kieran and Ella wore expressions of fierce commitment, refusing to let any harm come to Raven. They broke ranks to enact the final preparations. Raven and Lucian, hearts heavy and determined, walked to the balcony overlooking the courtyard as evening claimed the sky. Torches danced below, illuminating warriors in hushed conversation, couriers darting around delivering orders and vigilant guards scanning every shadow. Raven drew a slow breath, letting the tang of wood smoke and night air fill her lungs. Lucian stood at her side, gaze sweeping the horizon. She asked him softly if he was ready. He admitted he was as ready as he could be, though every second, worry for her gnawed at him. She stepped closer, turning so they faced each other. She told him that they had faced so many storms and emerged stronger. Whether Cedric's plan was to strike tonight or in days to come, they would meet him head-on. She set a hand against Lucian's chest, feeling the thunder of his heart. He curled his fingers under her chin, lifting her gaze to his. A fleeting shadow of fear passed across his features, but love burned there too. In that final hush of the evening, they stood together, the glow of torchlight from below accenting the tension in their expressions. Yet beyond the tension lay a bond forged in flames and tempered by loyalty. She rested a hand atop the gentle curve of her belly where their daughters waited. He covered her hand with his own, and for a moment, the hush seemed sacred. He murmured that he loved her, always had, always would. She told him she felt the same, that no force on this earth could break the bond they shared. A breeze swept in, carrying the faint sounds of the bustling courtyard. Raven glanced outward, seeing the watchful silhouettes of Kieran and Ella standing near the gates, deep in discussion. Thalos marched along the wall, instructing archers on where to position themselves. Darius led a group of younger warriors on patrol near the stables. The entire pack braced for whatever the night or the next day might bring. Raven realized she felt no doubt in their unity, only a deep sorrow that violence had reared its head once more, fueled by old grudges and dangerous greed. She leaned into Lucian's warmth, letting his arms circle her shoulders. With eyes that held both hope and fear, they looked to the land that sprawled beyond the walls. Imminent conflict might loom, but they had chosen to stand as protectors of each other and everything dear to them. In that moment, she tightened her grip on Lucian's hand, and he responded by gently kissing her hair. Neither of them spoke, as they watched the moon ascend in a pale arc overhead. Words were unnecessary. Their hearts beat in quiet tandem, a reminder that love could outlast any darkness. She whispered that no matter what befell them, no matter what shape Cedric's hatred took, they would face it. He pressed his cheek to hers, promising he would never leave her side. Together they inhaled the hush of the night, steeling themselves for the battles to come. And as the faint howling of distant wolves echoed against the castle walls, Raven felt a spark of certainty. Her daughters would be born into a kingdom that stood defiant against any who sought to snuff out its light. She and Lucian would not falter, for in their union, in their shared love and the solidarity of their pack, lay the seeds of triumph. The future might quiver with tension, but in their final vow that night, they sealed their commitment to protect each other and the legacy they were forging. Only time would tell if that vow would stand unbroken against the coming storm, but they refused to dwell on such doubts now. The last glow of torchlight flickered across their determined faces, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of a new, uncertain dawn.